parties in this, has been asked by Congress before, I think, to come and give evidence, and has refused so far.
Yes, he has. And I mean, he's been called on by the victims and by the victims' lawyers. There's been a mutual assistance treaty. I mean, he ran up to Balmoral to avoid the summons. So he's basically tried to avoid every stage of this, but I think he's now run out of road. I think this is the beginning of the end.
Do you think he's going to have to go? I mean, losing royal status is going to be a moment which means it's impossible to avoid this request.
Yes, I mean, I think, the King will be putting pressure on him. I mean, clearly it's an embarrassing position, but the Queen is very supportive of victims of this sort of abuse. And so I think no one is going to protect him any longer.
I mean, clearly the Americans can't actually come and grab him. They can't force him to turn up. But presumably the effect of not turning up will be to so damage whatever's left of his reputation. It can't be much.
Yes, but he's between a hard rock and a hard place because, whatever he does, he's going to be in trouble. I mean, he can give evidence in private. He can do it down the line. He doesn't have to go there. But I think he has to give evidence now. And I would say that Sarah Ferguson as well. She's a material witness.
And the two of them have effectively separated, as I understand.
Yes.
What does life hold, do you think, for Andrew now, living in whichever small cottage or house on the Sandringham estate he's given?
Well, I think it's going to be very limited, and I think it could be the beginning of a whole series of legal challenges. There's a private prosecution being launched. Various quite influential people, including former head of Royal Security, have called for him to be investigated. I think there are grounds under misconduct in public office. The sexual trafficking allegations, which he looked into 3 times and put him in a difficult position. He's going to have to explain a lot of things to this investigation committee, which are going to be embarrassing. It's going to open a whole new can of worms.
I can't remember any case of any member of the royal family ending up in prison in modern times. I mean, there may be medieval examples, Princess in the Tower and so on, but since then it's never happened, has it?
No, it's uncharted territory, and I think this is why the King was so keen to cut him totally loose, so that there could be no contamination on the royal family should something like this happen.
Is an astonishing story. Has there been the faintest indication at any point recently of Andrew wanting to make some kind of apology or restitution to the victims? Has he said anything about this at all?
No. I mean, the extraordinary thing is he's insisted on taking out an apology in all the statements that were prepared for him. And I think that's why the King stepped in the statement last Thursday and did make this point, which had been made to Andrew many, many times before, and he refused to countenance.
Well, this is an absolutely astonishing moment, Andrew Langley. Thank you very much indeed for coming in and talking to us. In the continuing clown show over the release of prisoners by mistake, at least somebody is doing the right thing. Billy Smith, 35, a convicted fraudster, has handed himself back in again after being wrongly sent packing from Wandsworth. Nick, let's talk to LBC's political editor, Natasha Clark. I say clown show, and clown show it has been. And finally, the Deputy Prime Minister has resurfaced again today.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. David Lammy has tonight broken his silence after that very awkward Prime Minister's questions yesterday. The news that 2 prisoners have been accidentally released early from prison, one of which, as you say, has handed themselves back in today. Mr Lammy was attending a prison building visit in Lincolnshire. He said that actually he only found out about this prisoner release on Wednesday morning. We'd thought that it was Tuesday night. He defended that he did not reveal the news to MPs in the Commons, saying he thought that this was the right judgment. Here's a little bit more about what he had to say earlier today.
The rate of release by error is too high. It has to come down. This is a paper-based system that obviously involves human error. We had 800 errors under the last government. This has now gone on for a generation. Our prison system is in crisis, so we have to bear down on this, but we have a mountain to climb.
And Andrew, he also claims that the release was actually before he introduced these checks just a few weeks ago following the release of Kubota. I'm told tonight that this error appears to have been that somebody did not upload the warrant for this man, as indeed they needed to do so. So get this, these new checks would not have picked that up anyway. So these checks...
This is literally computer says don't know.
Absolutely. So the new checks are meant to be someone more senior reviewing all of the information before a release. But if a warrant isn't uploaded, there's nothing to check. So it's it's more than just these new checks. And Lamy, when you just heard him just there, was talking about the paper-based system for this, so very much saying we need to bring this into the digital age. He also says, I've only been in place for 2 months. He admitted there is a mountain to climb. The Liberal Democrats are saying tonight the government must recall Parliament so that David Lammy can set the record straight. Of course, we're in recess now, so it might be a few more days until David Lammy can come to Parliament to answer some of these
perhaps a welcome few days respite. I mean, it's a very tangled story, as you were explaining to us just now, and it was at best inelegant in the House of Commons earlier in the week. Do you think David Lammy is in real trouble?
Look, I think when you look at the facts of the case, it appears that, it did take the prison itself a long time to reveal this news. So actually, David Lammy does have a get-out-of-jail-free card there. I do think that there are lots of Labour MPs and people I've been speaking to that believe that the way that he conducted himself in PMQs yesterday would have been easier for him to just fess up and say, actually, this is what happened, this is what I know, I see what the honourable gentleman is alluding to here. But David Lammy, you heard him just there defending himself, saying he was right to wait until all the details were revealed. So,
well, everyone will make their own judgments on that. Meanwhile, one of David Lammy's colleagues, as it were, another Labour MP, Lucy Powell, has emerged. She was, of course, the person who won the deputy leadership election. And I think at the time we were all asking ourselves, would she use this as a kind of platform or a pulpit to attack the government?
And absolutely. I mean, it's just a couple of weeks since she was elected as deputy Labour leader. She's already causing trouble for Sir Keir Starmer. Tonight she said the party must stick to its manifesto promises not to raise tax. When asked whether it would be acceptable to break this promise, Powell told the BBC we should be following through on our manifesto. Of course, there is no question about that. And of course, Andrew, it comes just after that huge speech from Rachel Reeves on Tuesday, where she hinted very much that is exactly what she might be about to do. And of course, speaking to you earlier, Andrew, she repeatedly refused to do that. You put it to her that she was looking at this and she just couldn't rule it out, could she? So Lucy Powell, already only been deputy Labour leader for a few weeks, she's already causing Keir Starmer a lot of headaches.
I'm so interested in this because I still think at some level that what's going on is the Treasury is floating this idea of breaking the manifesto and raising income tax. And if the reaction is too violent, too poisonous, then they'll pull back. But the fact, I know a lot of MPs, Labour MPs, some are saying this would be disastrous, some are saying it's exactly the right thing to do. They're divided, but Lucy Powell coming out may have some impact on the eventual policy. She may be helping to write the budget.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, Number 10 will be watching the reaction to this very, very carefully indeed. We've had two, very different strategies from two different sides of the Labour Party coming out this week. And if it is the case that there is a huge backlash going on, I mean, if I were in the Treasury right now, Andrew, I'd be putting two of these options to the Office for Budget Responsibility. I'd be looking at focus groups, I'd be looking at polling, I'd be looking at how this is going to go down, not just with my Labour backbenchers, but with the public at large. If you break a manifesto pledge on this scale that this Labour government is even looking at, is this going to be the beginning of the end of your government, or is it going to be something that the public can take for all of the reasons why what Rachel Reeves outlined on Tuesday? I don't think we know the answer to that just yet, and I don't think that Rachel Reeves herself has yet made up her mind, but they should be keeping all of these options on the table. It's very clear to you when she was speaking to you earlier, Andrew, those options are indeed very much on the table.
Really, really big choices there. Sometimes, Natasha, when I'm doing an interview, somebody says something so shocking that I don't quite sort of pick up on it as I should. I was absolutely astonished. The more I think about what Andrew Loney has just said about Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, the fact that the former Prince of Duke of York might end up in prison,
it's
absolutely jaw-dropping, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, when we didn't actually get a chance to discuss this on after your interview with the Chancellor, what I thought was also astonishing from that was when she refused again to rule out any changes to the triple lock. When young people are also looking at what's happening in terms of breaking this manifesto promise on income tax, how can it be the case that one promise from the manifesto is safe and another isn't? That is costing her £15 billion a year, Andrew, and I don't quite see how the Treasury, at a time where they're trying to make savings, is able to keep that on the table. But clearly, when she was talking to you, it seems like it is not even an option she was willing to even look at.
Wild times. Natasha Clark, thank you very much indeed. Coming up, will Elon Musk become the world's first ever trillionaire? I'm going to talk about that with a venture capitalist who backs the new socialist mayor of New York. Time now, 6:30, and Tim Humphrey has your news headlines.
700 officers from 10 different forces are deployed in Birmingham ahead of the Aston Villa-Maccabi Tel Aviv Europa League match. Away fans have been banned, but there are still a number of protest groups at the ground. The Justice Secretary has defended avoiding questions in the comments about mistakenly released prisoners, saying he hadn't been equipped with all the detail. David Lammy stayed quiet despite knowing 2 men had wrongly been freed from London's Wandsworth jail. One has now handed himself in. The Culture Secretary has been found to have breached the governance code on public appointments with her pick for football regulator. Lisa Nandy failed to disclose that David Cogan had donated to her Labour leadership campaign in 2020, but the report says she did so unknowingly. LBC weather, patchy rain in the southeast tonight, but most places will be dry, a low of 8 degrees.
On the latest episode of The Newsagents.
An extended interview with Malala Yousafzai, the champion of girls' education, the Nobel Prize winner, but also the struggles she's had to face in her own life.
Get the latest episode of The Newsagents with Emily Maitlis, John Sokol and Lewis Goodall. Listen or watch on our free Global Player app or the new LBC app.
Train to Cambridge and then all aboard the paddleboards. A little bit different, should be fun. Or wobbly, or wet. It's a good look on you, Steve. Actually, this is very relaxed. Georgie's up the River Cam without a paddle. Train home, that was such a laugh. I think I might even have a new hobby. Download the Thameslink Railway app to book tickets and save a third off group travel on off-peak journeys. Thameslink Railway, where every stop is a story.
How's the business going? We're busier than ever, but struggling to get the staff we need. Recruiting can be such a distraction. We gave Job Centre Plus a try, and they've really helped us out. Really? Yeah, it was dead easy. We got our own employer advisor, Julie, who helps advertise our jobs, shortlisted candidates for us, and let us interview at the Job Centre. We've hired some great people, and Job Centre Plus really took the hassle out of it, and there was no fee. Brilliant. That's straight on my to-do list.
Find out more at business.gov.uk/recruit. Eligibility criteria apply.
Buying a home on a holiday park was the retreat you always wanted. But then came unexpected site fee increases. And that was before the dramatic loss in value. If you bought a home on a holiday park in the UK, you may have been missold. HolidayParkAdviceCentre.co.uk could help you receive thousands in compensation. Text ASSIST to 78900. That's ASSIST to 78900.
Tonight with Andrew Marr. Listen on your smart speaker. Just say, play LBC.
6:33. How much does one man need? Tonight it looks as if Elon Musk might become the world's first dollar trillionaire. He, of course, was a big Donald Trump supporter. But my next guest, the US venture capitalist Bradley Tusk, has gone in the other direction. He once ran campaigns for Mike Bloomberg and other more centrist Democrats, but now he supports the radical socialist Zohran Mamdani, the mayor-elect of New York, and he joins me now. Bradley, thanks for talking to LBC tonight. Can I ask you, first of all, Mr. Mamdani was making a big deal in his acceptance speech of all the millionaires and the billionaires who had poured money into trying to stop him. Now, you're quite rare in being a well-off guy who went the other way. Just tell people why.
Yeah, I mean, look, to be clear, I don't know that I would have picked Mamdani, out of a hat to be the mayor, but ultimately he is running the kind of campaign that we, I think, need, especially among Democrats, right? He has a positive vision for New York. He has an affirmative agenda. He smiles. He's likable. When you contrast that to both the people running against him in this race or the Democrats in Washington, all they do is complain. All they do is whine. All they do is tell you how terrible everyone and everything is and how morally inferior everyone is. And voters hate that, right? And so for the first time now, we have someone who has ideas. Will all of his ideas be achievable in the way he proposed them? No, but I think they're achievable one way or another, and they don't have to happen on day one either. And so I think, we could use some youth, some enthusiasm, some new ideas. There are a lot of things he believes that I don't support, but there are a lot of ideas that he has that to me could make a big difference.
You've done very well. You've been very successful. Are you concerned about inequality in the way American society is going?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I don't think how we can keep going this way, and I think especially with AI. I mean, right now, if we don't do anything, it seems to me you could have a world with Elon and 25 other trillionaires and 19% unemployment, and to me, that just means the French Revolution's coming, right? And so if you don't want a society where people are struggling to put food on the table, struggling to make rent, struggling to pay the utilities, and we shouldn't have that here because this is the richest, most abundant country in the history of the world, then we should be in a position to make sure that people at least have the basics. So when Andrew Yang first came to prominence, his big idea was universal basic income, predicated on the notion that AI will cause a lot of short-term job displacement. I thought that was the right idea then. I think that's the right idea now. Out of my foundation, we fund and run campaigns in states all over the U.S. to mandate that every kid get breakfast and lunch for free at school, because we should never have hungry kids. And we've had some success in passing those bills, but the notion that anybody would oppose the idea of a child getting fed is crazy to me, right? Like, what kind of world do we live in? And so if Elon Musk says he needs $1 trillion because he's going to solve global hunger or something like that, great, have at it. But I don't know what you could possibly buy with $1 trillion that you couldn't buy with $100 billion or probably even $10 billion.
Yes, there is something literally grotesque about all of those kinds of sums. Let me ask you a little bit about your own journey, because you built up your own business. I think investing in relatively small startups is how you've made your pile, as it were. But you have your not-for-profit or your charitable wing. And as you were saying, you focused on food quality and children. And I wonder why that subject in particular, whether you came across it. I know you're a Brooklyn guy, whether you came across it in New York.
Yeah, it's a great question. So I've been interested in kind of food stuff for a long time. So since 1991, I've been volunteering with Lead Soup Kitchens. And I'm a first-generation American. I didn't grow up with a lot of money. I worked in government for the first part of my career and didn't make much money. And then when I started my first company, we did pretty well pretty quickly. And I started writing checks to the New York City Food Bank. And it's a lovely organization, and they invited me to some meetings. And having had spent a career in government and politics, my takeaway was these are absolutely wonderful people, and almost by definition, because they're so nice, they're terrible at politics. And so when they had legislation to like feed kids, it never went anywhere. And so my question was, if the people who work with me and have the skill sets that we have were to run these campaigns, and if I were to personally pay for all of the things that a good corporate campaign would have, lobbyists, PR, social media, earned media, grassroots, all the usual stuff, could those bills pass? And so the answer has been yes. We've passed 29 bills in 22 states, 4.75 million people every single day now get food as a result of those bills. 93% of them are kids, and about $9 million of my money in this case has helped unlock about $6.8 billion in new government spending on hunger programs. So the ability to have an impact is very real. I just wish more of us were willing to do it.
Absolutely. Go you, good for you. What's your message to the billionaires, not trillionaires, but the billionaires and the multimillionaires who put so much time and effort into stopping Mandami because they say, here's this radical socialist, it'll be the end of the world if he takes over.
Right.
And they must now be having a little bit of a tremor.
They are. So I would have a narrow message and a broader message, if that's okay. The narrow message, and I've been saying this to them for months now, is you need to understand how municipal government actually works. So what that he's a socialist? I'm not a socialist, but guess what? He doesn't control interest rates. He doesn't control the supply chain. He can't even raise taxes without the state government approving it. So the notion that he's all of a sudden going to turn New York City into this radical socialist utopia, like even if he wanted to, he doesn't have the power to do so. The job of the mayor is to pick up the trash. It's to make sure the lights turn from green to red. It's to make sure clean water goes through the taps. The first thing is they just don't understand what city government actually is. The second thing, to me, from a much broader standpoint, is something that I try to teach my kids all the time, which is, look, I didn't have money, now I do. It's good to have it. Like, I'm not going to pretend otherwise. With that said, if you look at all of happiness science and all of behavioral economics, there are two proven things that make human beings happy, assuming you have the basics, right? Which is unconditional love and support in relationships, and work or something that you do that gives you meaning and purpose. The people who have those things tend to consistently be pretty happy. The people who don't, no matter how much money you have, even if you're a trillionaire, it doesn't really matter. So if the goal in life is to be happy and to make the most of the brief time that we have on this earth, that should be by investing in relationships and investing in things that give you real meaning and fulfillment, not just by buying more and more stuff.
That's beautifully put. There's a severe danger I'm going to get myself a bright red cap made. It is going to read Tusk, not Must, on the top of it.
I'll take it. If you get one, send me one too.
And I'll send you one. Well, listen, very good luck, and it was great to hear such a positive message from New York. Thank you so much, Bradley, for talking to me. A record number of people have been referred to the counter-terrorism scheme PREVENT. 8,778 referrals in the year up to March. That's up more than a quarter on the previous year. The referrals, which can come from schools or police or local councils and families, surged by 34% after the Southport murders in July. The biggest proportion were among children and people with no ideology, but 21% were for extreme right-wing beliefs and 10% for Islamist extremism. Let's hear now from Sir Peter Fahy, the former Chief Constable of Greater Manchester Police and former head of PREVENT. Was he surprised by the sudden jump in the figures?
I don't think it's a surprise. We've seen other evidence that there are particularly more young people causing concern. We see that through figures like school exclusions and suspensions, and what we know is out there in terms of exposure to violent material. But at the same time, I think we probably have got in these figures a lot of professionals just playing safe, particularly after the Southport attack, and referring more people into the scheme. What we see in the figures is it carries a trend where it's more and more young people. The most likeliest age here is between 11 and 15, and also that a lot of the people being referred are of no fixed ideology. So we need to remember that PREVENT is about terrorism. Terrorism needs to have an ideology. And what we're seeing is more and more evidence that there are more young people who essentially have just got a fixation with violence and are very chaotic in terms of what's driving that and what they actually believe.
So this is a really big problem. If you've got young people, they're not Islamists, they're not far right, they're just obsessed by violence. Is this because they're just watching lots and lots of violent stuff online on the dark web, perhaps more and more extreme things, and being frankly poisoned by it?
That maybe I don't think we fully understand really, Andrew, what is going on. And I think we need to put it in the context that actually violent crime is coming down. We've got a very low number of homicides at the moment, and thankfully there are very few terrorist attacks. I think what it's showing is we have got, though, a large number of young people, or a relatively large number of young people, who've got this obsession with violence. And certainly in my time as Chief Constable of Greater Manchester, I saw a number of individuals who carried out horrendously violent acts. You couldn't say they had a particular ideology. They were just violent individuals, and often what they were seeking was notoriety for that violence. And so I think what this says as well is that the old definition of terrorism no longer is really applying, and therefore we now need a much broader programme, which is just looking at people who've got this obsession with violence, and putting in a load of different measures to try and deal with them, and particularly trying to obviously head them off at an earlier stage.
Is this something that when you were head of PREVENT you started to see happening? In other words, is it a longer-term trend?
Not really, no. Certainly when I was there, there was a lot more, obviously, around IS and all the material that was coming out of IS on the internet, and the situation in Syria. But clearly the world has changed rapidly since then, and radically. We're not just seeing that in the UK, we're seeing that across Europe and other parts of the world. And as I say, a number of reports have now said we need a much broader programme. I think the other thing which is happening at the moment, Andrew, is we see from the evidence even today at the Southport inquiry that there was a family that had concerns about a member of their family and didn't really know what to deal with it. And I think within the figures, it's disappointing to see that the number of referrals coming from families and local communities has actually gone down.
Yeah.
And we need a scheme where when there are parents, families, family members, whatever, people in the community that have concern about a young person, that they've got confidence to report that and know that that will be taken seriously and proportionately.
You've said in the past that you think PREVENT needs to be updated and modernised. Is this part of what you mean? Do we need, in effect, to have a kind of advertising plan for Prevent to get the idea into families, into communities more deeply?
Yeah, but we need a much broader programme. I've been part of the commission which actually will publish its report on Tuesday, and this will be one of its recommendations. We need a much broader programme, and we know actually what works. It is about good role models, it is about youth services, it's about sports and other activities which divert young people in particular from all the poisonous material which is out there, and obviously is more likely to sort of fester when young people are just in their rooms staring at computers. So this issue is solvable, but it would be much better if we try and help young people at a far earlier stage than having to, sadly, experience huge tragedies and enormous expense when a very violent incident occurs.
And when we look at those who are ideologically driven, I was surprised to see that people with far-right ideologies are now about twice as likely to be on Prevent than Islamists, for instance. Is that just a reflection of the general politics of the mid-2020s?
I think it is, although I say again, as you've sort of seen from the figures, the biggest group are of no fixed ideology, but certainly, absolutely, there is more extreme right-wing material out there, some very hateful stuff, and there's no question that there are a group of young men in particular, because overwhelmingly this is about men. There are a group of young men that are very vulnerable to being poisoned by this sort of material, and a small number who then are prepared to turn that into violence.
So, Peter, thank you very much for talking to LBC. Now, in a few moments, I'll be joined by my political panel on a week where the Chancellor looks set to break her manifesto pledges and the Labour government suffered further embarrassments with more accidental releases of sex offenders from prison. Time now, 6:46.
Coming up at 7, Ali Mirage, leading Britain's conversation. Next on LBC.
For anyone needing assistance when travelling with TfL, such as people with visual or mobility impairments, our Turn Up and Go service has staff on hand to help. It's available at all London Underground, London Overground and Elizabeth Line stations, and there's no need to book. Just turn up and go. That is how we're making the greener way to travel more accessible to all. Search TfL Improvement Plan. To the Mayor of London and TfL, every journey matters. Greener than total estimated petrol and diesel car emissions.
You plan a holiday, you plan a commute. Meal plans, career plans, even workouts need a plan. So doesn't it stand to reason that your money has one too? Because the sad truth is, if it doesn't, it's just sitting there, barely growing, if at all. That's why you need a money plan. And Quilter can help. It's a lot easier to stick to than a workout plan. Money needs a plan. Quilter. Pensions, investments, advice. Find out more at quilter.com.
At Laithwaite's, we go to great lengths to bring you great wine. We go far and wide. Searching high, and we mean really high. And low, and we mean stored deep underground in a cave. Off the shelf? We don't go there. Off the beaten track? We certainly go there. And the best bit is, we even come to you. Order now at laithwaites.co.uk. Laithwaites. We stop at nothing to bring you great wine.
Leading Britain's conversation, LBC, tonight with Andrew Marr.
6:48. So, quite a week. All the rather strange hoo-ha about whether the Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, will break her manifesto pledges and raise income tax. Then that incredibly embarrassing farce over the release by accident of 2 foreign sex offenders. And an important speech by Nigel Farage in which he formally buried many of his early and very large promises about tax giveaways. My panel today is Kate Ferguson, political editor of The Sun on Sunday, and Dan Bloom, political editor of Politico. Welcome to you both. Let's start with Rachel Reeves. Kate, I thought it was an extraordinary thing. We have never had a Chancellor making those kind of interventions 3 weeks before a budget.
This kind of almost emergency-sounding press conference she gave, where she rolled the pitch for one thing and one thing only, and that is more big tax rises. I mean, I think after that speech this week, we can be in no doubt that that manifesto tax pledge, no rise in income, VAT or employee NICs, is dead and buried. It's on the bonfire.
I'm very interested you say that, because it could be certainly a huge question mark hanging over it. But, we had Lucy Powell earlier today saying, they must not do this. A lot of Labour MPs are in a state of some shock about the possibility. Dan, is it possible, therefore, that this is a sort of clever game. She puts the idea out, she gets us all interested in it, then she sits back to see just how toxic it's going to be. And if it's too bad, she doesn't do it in the end.
Well, I want to know whether Lucy Powell would then do the next step, which is vote against the budget if it does break this manifesto pledge, because I think the same thing as Kate. The one message from that press conference this week was to tell the public, not just that we in the bubble already know that they're going to break the manifesto, it was to tell the public that they're going to do it too and pitch one for that.
I do agree with you. I interviewed Rachel Reeves and I asked again and again and again, you're going to raise taxes, you're going to raise taxes, are you going to raise taxes, are you going to raise income tax, you're going to raise income tax, and there was no hint of don't be silly, Andrew, calm down. Not at all. It was fairly clear what message she was trying to get through.
Yeah, I mean, I think it would just be too clever by half to let us all think that, to do a whole Downing Street address, a very unusual measure by a Chancellor just a few weeks out from a budget, and then say, jokes on you. You know, like, that's just stupid politics, isn't it?
And it would make us look very silly as well, which would also be very bad for the nation.
I'm quite used to looking silly, but the one thing I think is that it might be just not quite as bad as they're pitch rolling for. So they still make a massive breach. They still kind of go far further than they said they would ever go, but just not quite as far.
There's no point in breaking your promise about income tax and then just raising it by 1p and not getting quite enough money. If they're going to do it, they might as well do it bigger.
Or maybe they take 2p onto income tax and take it off national insurance.
That's so fiddly. I mean, I wrote a couple of weeks ago that we're looking at 2p on income. That's still what my money's on, because it strikes me that if you're going to break your manifesto pledge on tax, you want to make the money from it in one fell swoop. You don't want to be coming back next year. You don't want to be doing 7 billion by doing half a dozen here, half a dozen there. You don't want a smorgasbord. You want to be going big.
I mean, economically, this might well be the sensible thing to do. Everybody's in it together. Everybody takes a bit of pain, but she doesn't have to go for a business which is already struggling. She doesn't have to raise taxes on employers who are already reluctant to hire. And so it might be the sensible thing economically to do. But what do we all think about the political effects? Is this absolute death?
Well, one of my favourite Britney Spears songs is Toxic, and this will be toxic. She's going to be breaking a manifesto pledge. Her own personal commitment will be shredded, so there will be questions about whether or not she can carry on in the role. I personally don't see her resigning or being booted out immediately, but I do think this will be her credibility shredded. And, you know, can Rachel Reeves, can Keir Starmer ever stand up again in front of a Labour manifesto and say, trust me, this is our manifesto promise, when you've broken the only one, pretty much, in your last manifesto?
So, Kate Ferguson says toxic, Dan Bloom terminal.
Well, I think the issue is that her and Keir Starmer are very, very joined up about this. If one goes, it makes it easier for the other to go. And, you know, they meet every week to talk about the upcoming budget or whatever it is about the economy. They have these long, like, one-on-one meetings and stuff. They are doing the same plan. It's not quite, you know, Liz Truss and Kwasi Kwarteng levels yet, but it's the same principle. That it's not like she's gone off and done something wrong. She's doing what he wants her to do. So if she has to go over this, then logically it follows that he would too.
There were hints that Number 10 is not totally happy with the way that she handled that day. That there was a sort of sense, I'm the Chancellor, therefore I'm not really in charge.
But I think, she is in charge, isn't she?
Well, exactly.
She is making these decisions, and Number 10 is fully in with it. I'm sure those hints haven't come from nowhere. I'm sure there is unhappiness in the building, but ultimately the PM has set up this budget board where it's got his own economic advisor on it. It's got, people from across Number 10 and Number 11, and the whole point is that they have more joined-up decision-making now.
I agree. I don't think we can ever see this as like a kind of rogue chancellor or a chancellor of a slightly different ilk to the PM doing their own thing. Are they going to butt heads? I mean, even like Rishi and Boris had that friction at the end, which eventually led to Rishi going. I mean, they're joined at the hip. Always, all ministers can be sacked. The only one that can't be is the Prime Minister. But I think this idea that there's a rift or some kind of fork in the road between them is wrong. Rachel and Keir are probably two ministers most in lockstep.
I suggested to Rachel that she might like to announce that she had to do it, but therefore had to break her promise, and as an honourable politician was going to step down as Chancellor of the Exchequer immediately afterwards. She didn't like the idea very much, I have to say. She didn't. Let's move on to the other great big story of the week, which we've all covered, which is this sequence of releases by accident of people from prison. In two cases, sex offenders of foreign origin or foreign, one an asylum seeker, one being deported or in the process of being deported. What happens occasionally to governments is that they just have a really, really bad run of luck. Everything goes wrong day after day, hour after hour, and it's beginning to feel like that with this government.
Yes, and once you get that narrative, it feels a bit like meltdown in Downing Street. I thought the scenes at PMQs this week were both worrying, like genuinely worrying for the public, and also kind of thick of it levels farcical. So you had another prisoner let out by accident, another alleged sex attacker. You had a deputy PM who refused to say it. You know, despite being asked 5 times, and the news breaks at the end of PMQs that indeed there has been another accidental release. So that all looked kind of almost comedic. Almost you couldn't write a satire that on the nose. But the broader point for the public, my readers, your listeners, will be that actually, why are there rocketing numbers of prisoners who are being accidentally released? Now, this has happened before, but the numbers have rocketed under Labour's watch. And
it seems to be something to do with the early release. I was going to say. Dan, what did you make of David Lammy's performance in the Prime Minister's questions? I mean, he was very, very angry. I think genuinely angry. Chris Skidmore didn't count the right number of questions properly, I think. So he also had a little problem. But what did you make of it?
I mean, they had problems on both sides, but and there was also the Tory thing of asking about an asylum seeker, where technically it was a foreign criminal but not an asylum seeker. I do think that sort of pales in significance compared to David Lammy's problems. The way he dealt with those questions, where he was very haughty, he was very defensive. By the time he got to the 4th and 5th questions, all the journalists in the gallery are like, the Tories know something here. Okay, what's going on? All these reasons about, I didn't have the full facts at my disposal. I like to think terribly naively sometimes with this stuff and just think, well, why can't you say, I believe the honourable gentleman is referring to, a case details of which are about to make public. It's irresponsible of me to freewheel on this at the dispatch box, but I'll give him an update momentarily straight after PMQs as soon as I've spoken to my officials. That would have gotten him in a whole load of trouble, but would have gotten him into less trouble. What he did.
I think the public and people like us probably underestimate just how difficult and stressful Prime Minister's question is. Quite how fast you have to dance on your toes when those kinds of things happen. Sort of behind all of this, I guess, we're in a situation where Reform are 10 points ahead of everybody else. We've got 4 parties clustered around the same kinds of polling. And so we're moving into a new kind of politics, and I thought the speech by Nigel Farage at the beginning of the week was highly significant, simply because he ditched so many unaffordable policies which were beginning to make Reform look, absolutely out of control on the economy. And thoughts from both of you on that?
I think the most interesting bit, I didn't go to Nigel Farage's speech, I admit. I did go to Richard Tice's speech last night. And at the same time as they've killed off this manifesto from last year, Richard Tice is going about kind of making free with raising the idea of doing things that cost billions and billions of pounds. Or indeed save billions and billions of pounds, but not saying I'll definitely do it. He's talking about sort of scrapping, he's hinting at like scrapping cash ISAs. He's talking about scrapping inheritance tax entirely, even though that isn't actually Reform's policy at the moment. And lots of other things like that, changing defined benefit pensions for public sector workers, whatever.
And some quite sort of tough stuff, like they are going to look again at the triple lock, which the main parties are too scared of voters to talk about.
I actually think it's super interesting. I mean, we were waiting for this speech by Reform by Nigel Farage to kind of whip their economic policy into a bit more shape. We all knew it was pie in the sky policy at the last election. Because they were this sort of insurgency party, no one took that seriously. So they needed to get this speech out of the way and do it. But the really interesting thing is, as these kind of insurgents, are they allowed to kind of think the unthinkable? Are they allowed to say they'll scrap the triple lock? Which, if they did, right, is something basically every government wants to do but are not brave enough to do.
Yeah, I wrote a big piece about the triple lock thing this week, and the fact that everyone wants to do it and no one in the Labour or the Tories could admit it. And will Reform give the permission, or will they just start a horrible campaign
I spoke to a cabinet minister about this, and he said, well, it's the prisoner's dilemma, Andrew. Everybody knows what needs to be done, but nobody wants to move first. Anyway, we've run out of time. Thank you both very much. Dan and Kate. If you've missed any of today's show, you can listen back on the free Global Player app or the new LBC app, where you can stay up to date with all the latest news and opinion. Put your news categories in the order you'd like them. Pause, rewind, live radio, and listen to a range of podcasts. So download the all-new official LBC app free from your app store now. Coming up at 10 on LBC, it's Ben Kentish. But right now, it's time for Ali Mirage.
Thanks, Andrew. Gangs of masked protesters have posted Zionist not welcome signs around Birmingham just hours before Aston Villa's clash against Maccabi Tel Aviv amid fears of violence with more than 700 police officers deployed. Should Maccabi Tel Aviv have been allowed to play against Aston Villa? At 8, Rachel Reeves is considering using this month's budget to announce plans for a pay-per-mile tax for electric vehicles worth an extra 250 quid a year on average, meaning EV drivers pay a charge of 3p per mile. Should drivers be charged to use the roads? And at 9, Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor has been summoned to appear before Congress, which is investigating abuse claims against him, as they believe he may also have crucial information about what happened. Should Andrew come clean to the British public?
On your radio, on the LBC app, and
Hey, LBC.
Leading Britain's conversation. This is LBC.
From Global's newsroom at 7 o'clock, pro-Palestine protests are taking place outside Aston Villa's ground as it prepares to host Maccabi Tel Aviv. The Israeli-sized fans are banned from attending, but authorities are still concerned there will be trouble. Chief Superintendent Tom Joyce told LBC he's confident his officers have the experience to cope.
We do big operations. We had the Commonwealth Games a couple of years ago, which was a really significant policing operation. We have big political party conferences, so we are used to putting on big policing operations. Without doubt, for a football match, this is a fairly significant undertaking.
The father of the Southport killer says he should have told police when he saw his son had brought a machete. Alphonse Rudakabana has been speaking at the inquiry into last year's attack in which Axel Rudakabana murdered 3 small girls, including Elsie Doss Stanko. Her mother and father want the killer's parents held to account for what they allowed to happen. Here's the inquiry's chair, Sir Adrian Fulford.
Our principal responsibility lies to them to provide the best possible explanation as to why this terrible event occurred, and to be brave about suggesting the changes to prevent a repetition.
Members of the US Congress have written to Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor requesting he sit for a transcribed interview in connection with his long-standing friendship with paedophile financier Jeffrey Epstein. The letter, signed by 16 members of Congress, requests Andrew respond by November the 20th. Royal historian Andrew Loney told Andrew Marr the former prince has avoided previous requests.
He's been called on by the victims and by the victims' lawyers. There's been a mutual assistance treaty. I mean, he ran up to Balmoral to avoid the summons. So he's basically tried to avoid every stage of this, but I think he's now run out of road. I think this is the beginning of the end for him.
Justice Secretary David Lammy says he didn't tell Parliament about the mistaken release of 2 prisoners yesterday because he wasn't equipped with all the detail. One of 2 men wrongly freed from London's Wandsworth jail has handed himself in. LBC's political editor, Natasha Clark, told there had been a problem uploading documents.
The new checks are meant to be someone more senior reviewing all of the information before a release, but if a warrant isn't uploaded, there's nothing to check. So it's more than just these new checks, and Lammy was talking about the paper-based system for this, so very much saying we need to bring this into the digital age.
Prince William is warning world leaders to do what they can to limit global heating ahead of a UN climate summit. Delegates at COP30 have been warned that missing the key 1.5-degree limit would be a moral failure. But the presidents of the world's 2 biggest greenhouse gas emitters, China and the US, are not at the talks. Chris Skidmore was the Tory minister who signed the UK up to net zero. He told Tonight with Andrew Marr on LBC he fears the consensus on climate change has broken down.
We were the party in opposition that made the Labour Party go even further in emissions reductions during the Climate Change Act in 2008. Now, neither of those pieces of legislation would be possible today, thanks to the centre-right having abandoned its climate commitments, which I think is a grave mistake given the economic opportunity
The Culture Secretary has apologised to Sir Keir Starmer after she was found to have breached the code on public appointments. Lisa Nandy says she unknowingly broke part of guidance by selecting David Cogan as chairman of the independent football regulator. The Commissioner for Public Appointments found she'd failed to declare that the businessman had donated to her leadership campaign in 2020. In the city, the FTSE 100 closed down 41 points at 97.36. The pound buy is $1.31 and €1.13. LBC weather, patchy rain in the southeast tonight, but most places will be dry, a low of 8 degrees. Some bright intervals tomorrow, but most places will see showers with more prolonged rain in the southwest and a high of 15 degrees. From Global's newsroom for LBC, I'm Tim Humphrey.
This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation with Ali Mirage.
Very good evening to you, Sam Mirage on LBC, 5 minutes past 7. I shall be with you until 10 p.m. In for Ian Dale. And I wanted to start with Maccabi Tel Aviv and what's happening in Birmingham this evening. But it is reported that a major police operation is underway as protesters assemble ahead of this controversial match between Aston Villa and Maccabi Tel Aviv. Now, more than 700 officers are on the streets of Birmingham for the UEFA Europa League match, which kicks off at 8 o'clock this evening amid protests alongside police horses, dogs, drones and road units. It is being reported that some gangs of protesters have posted Zionists not welcome signs around Birmingham just as before the match, amid fears of mob violence spilling onto the streets, such as the fear of heightened tensions. That nearby schools have also apparently closed early, and no-fly zones apparently also been placed around Villa Park. And the scale of the police operation is unprecedented, given that officially no supporters of the visiting side, Maccabi Tel Aviv, will be present. Now, Maccabi Tel Aviv is the only Israeli side to reach the league stage of the European competition this season, and have seen their fans banned from attending the match by Birmingham's Safety Advisory Group after West Midlands Police last month deemed the fixture high risk. I just want to ask you this question, really. Should Maccabi Tel Aviv have been allowed to play against Aston Villa at all? Forget about the fans for a second, because they've been dressed up about the fans and fan behaviour. But for a lot of people, this isn't about fans at all, is it? It is about whether an Israeli team should be allowed to play in a Europa League sporting fixture. So let's just be honest about it, and let's have a conversation like mature adults, shall we? Should Maccabi Tel Aviv have been allowed to play against Aston Villa? 0345 6060 973, text 84850. Now joining me is Luke Shanahan, LBC's reporter at Villa Park. Luke, what is the latest?
Well, Ali, I won't answer that question of yours, but I can confirm everything else that you said. Besides, thankfully, mob violence breaking out. That hasn't happened here, very, very fortunately. The police promise has been kept. There are countless officers just... It's like from where I'm stood now, I'd lose count because I'd run into myself trying to do it. I'm told it's just the 10 police forces supporting West Midlands Police here in the city tonight, but thankfully they don't seem to have been called upon for anything bar separating fans and protesters so far. I spoke with Birmingham Police Commander Chief Superintendent Tom Joyce about the size of the police operation here tonight and asked how warranted concerns around the gang are.
I'm aware there's a lot of commentary around the threat to the fans being the reason for the decision. To be clear, that was not the primary driver. That was a consideration. We have intelligence and information that says that there is a section of Maccabi fans, not all Maccabi fans, but a section of them who engage in quite significant levels of hooliganism. What is probably quite unique in these circumstances is whereas often hooligans will clash with other hooligans and it will be contained within the football fan base. We've had examples where a section of Maccabi fans were targeting people not involved in football matches, and certainly we had an incident in Amsterdam last year which has informed some of our decision making. So it is exclusively a decision we made on the basis of the behaviour of a subsection of Maccabi fans.
In total, it's more than 700 officers policing the match. That includes mounted officers, police dog units, a drone unit. There's also a no-fly zone around Villa Park. Just as a comparison, a local derby between Birmingham City and Aston Villa in 2018 was policed by about 450 officers, and that, of course, had full home and away ends. The stream of supporters arriving at the ground has gotten steadier ahead of the 8 o'clock kickoff, and we don't know exactly what to expect. We do know a lot have opted to follow the game from home. As of yesterday, there were still thousands of unsold tickets, but so far the noisiest voices have been supporting Palestine, not Villa. There are stands, Palestine flags, anti-Israel banners, and some all around towns with anti-Zionist messages.
Okay, I think Luke's line is not brilliant, but we got the gist of it. There are lots and lots of police around this match in Birmingham between Aston Villa and Maccabi Tel Aviv. And what we also know is that there have been some pretty unsavoury signs going up saying Zionists not welcome around Birmingham ahead of this match. There's other footage showing shooting babies in Gaza, playing games in Birmingham. If you see a Zionist, call it anti-terror hotline. Hashtag Zionists not welcome. From apparently it's Deanified is a group that's putting this out. I don't know who they are, I've never heard of them before. But it's not exactly pleasant stuff. So I just want to get to the crux of the issue here, because we know that a few weeks ago, when this whole conversation was going on about the safety advisory group saying that this shouldn't go ahead based on the fact that West Midlands Police had said that it would be a high-risk backdrop to this, given what had happened in Amsterdam last year. There were questions around the behaviour of Maccabi Tel Aviv fans. There were also questions about the behaviour of opposition fans and other local people in Amsterdam, and what had happened, and whether certain Israeli fans had been persecuted as well. And if you read the Amsterdam police's report on that, it is pretty damning, frankly, against all sides. And it did say that there were concerns over the safety of Israeli fans as well on behalf of Maccabi Tel Aviv. So it's not a clear-cut thing. So whichever view you want to have, it was a shambles, quite frankly, last year, and it was also a public security risk. So that is exactly why you can understand that the police who are trying to do their job and keep people safe were reticent about the fans coming. Now, in this particular case, the Maccabi Tel Aviv club decided to pull its fans out because they didn't want this becoming a political football. That's what's happened. So this is no longer about the fans, right? So let's just park the whole fans thing for a second, shall we? And just on this, remember Ayub Khan, the MP for Birmingham Perry Bar, who argued on the 17th of September that the game should be called off.
I've got two very strong views on this. The first is one of safety. Safety of not just residents, local businesses, fans and staff that work here at the ground. But I've also got a moral argument. We've banned teams from Russia, for example, because of their involvement in Ukraine. Here, I firmly believe that we should have that moral equivalence. The banning of Maccabi Tel Aviv would send a strong signal to a nation that's responsible for a genocide.
Right, at least you can't be honest about it, right? So, for those of you out, whoever you are, who are dressing this up as solely or even primarily about fan behaviour, I'm not really convinced it was. I think it was much deeper than that. Yes, fan behaviour is part of it, but the much deeper question, let's be honest about it, is there are lots and lots of people out there in the country who just simply don't want an Israeli team to play in a Europa League match. Let's just be honest about it, right? Let's not pussyfoot around, but that is what it is about. Now, I want to get to the crux of that issue and ask you this, because there have been arguments that if Israel is regarded by some in this country as a pariah state, should it be therefore meted out with the same treatment that South Africa got for many years when it came to sporting events? Should it be meted out with the same treatment that Russia has been given by FIFA and UEFA? Should it be the same? That is the question. Should this match have been allowed to go ahead with Maccabi Tel Aviv playing any role in it whatsoever based on moral grounds and the actions of the Israeli government. That is the crux of the issue. Should Maccabi Tel Aviv have been allowed to play against Aston Villa? 0345 6060 973, text 84850. Now I want you to bear this in mind. Where you think about this question, is it a question of the fact that an Israeli club is trying to play in a European football because it's an Israeli club, right? And why should Israeli players within a club be in any way responsible for the actions of the Israeli government, whether you like the actions of the Israeli government or you abhor them? Why should a team that's just going about its business, which is paid to win matches, be prevented from doing so? Is there a difference between that kind of team and a national team in an international competition like the Olympics or the World Cup that is representing the nation? So the Israeli badminton team or the Israeli pole vaulting team or the Israeli Eurovision Song Contest, I don't know. Is there a difference between someone who's representing a state versus a club where the members of that club happen to be Israeli citizens? Is there a difference or not? I'd love to know your view. Do you think that these bans, irrespective of whether it's a club or whether it's representing a state-level thing, should actually be a thing or not? Because it's not the fault of the individual athletes or sports individuals, sports people who are doing their job. Why should they be dragged into interstate discussions around the actions of their government, which some people find completely abhorrent? Why should that be a thing? I want to hear your views on this, because it doesn't go just to football, it goes also to Eurovision and other things. Should Maccabi Tel Aviv have been allowed to play Aston Villa this evening? 0345 6060 973, text 84850. Ali Mirage in for Ian Dale on LBC's 916.
This is LBC.
A message from TFL.
I saw him in the local news a few days after. His name's Rakesh. They had to put him into a coma just because I didn't look again at that team. He had 2 kids. How did I not see his bike ahead of me? Well, I didn't look again. He didn't make it.
Drivers, take another look, not a life. To the Mayor of London and TFL, every journey matters.
We had our smart meter installed a year ago, and it's made things so much easier. Not having to submit meter readings or having to deal with estimated bills is great.
A smart meter sends meter readings direct to your energy supplier. It means you get accurate bills, not estimated bills, and you don't even need an internet connection. Call your energy supplier to request a smart meter today.
Real testimonials voiced by actors. Eligibility may vary.
Private healthcare sounds pricey. At Benenden Health, it's less than £16 per person per month, just for GP calls. For a 24/7 GP helpline, physio, diagnostics and more. And tell me all about my medical history. No medical questionnaires or hidden charges. We like to call it healthcare done different. Spot on. Benenden Health. Healthcare done different. Fee review periodically. 6-month wait for some services. T&Cs apply. Selected surgical procedures after 6 months. 24 in Northern Ireland. UK only. Visit benenden.co.uk.
Ali Mirage on LBC. Call 0345 6060 973.
Ali Mirage on LBC. It's 7:17. I'm in for Ian Dale. Should Maccabi Tel Aviv have been allowed to play against Aston Villa? 0345 6060 973, text 84850. John in Birmingham, good evening.
Good evening, Ali. How are you?
Very well.
Driving home at Birmingham, going through everything you've seen, and to be honest, my blood's boiling on this one. It has been for a number of weeks, Ali. I think there's a couple of important points I want to make. First is that this has nothing to do with fans. I'm a Villa fan, a lifetime Villa fan, and it's been breaking to see the media attention to be also, should we say, the social media trends towards the club. The club had nothing to do with the decisions around this. I think the blame firmly with it lies with the government in the way that they handled this in the initial outset, and the way that it's gone from being an issue to a global issue, because the government did not correctly handle it. And just proportionate in what you were saying in the first 15 minutes or so, what's actually been seen is a single video by some idiots, and they're idiots for posting stuff like that on social media, that has now been carried by all of the media outlets. That's one video.
So which video are you talking about?
The video of the 4 individuals putting the posters up.
Yeah.
I've watched the video earlier. It's heartbreaking because that is inadvertently linking to our club and to our city. And Birmingham has had such a bad rap recently from the government. From one minister going to Handsworth, what's happened with Villa. The government need to get a grip and sort their actions out, because tonight is going to be, and I hope and pray it is, a complete anticlimax. And do you know what? For all the grief that West Midlands police were given recently, I actually say, do you know what? Fair plays to them. But what cost for government incompetency and that? And all I ask, Ali, is you as a leading figure in the media, please, let's be proportionate about what actually happens and what goes on tonight. Let's not drum this up. Because we've got a great club there, and I don't want to name drag through the gutter.
Of course, absolutely agree. John, let me ask you this. Do you think, irrespective of fans, park fans for a second, I'll kind of come back to fans in a minute. Do you think that an Israeli club should have been prevented from playing in a European football tournament?
That is the responsibility of UEFA.
No, but John, I'm asking, that's a cop-out. I'm asking you the question.
No, Ali, I'm going to come on to it. It needs to have been proportionate with other decisions that have been made in other areas. But once again, this is politics and sport, which is becoming a very murky water, as it was with Russia and the Ukraine situation. And decisions need to be made. And what do we have in this country? We have a sports minister. And I link it back to the government.
But what do you think, John?
Direct decisions made.
Okay, we can all hide behind UEFA. What do you, John, think? Because this is your town, Birmingham, right? This is happening. What do you think, intuitively? Do you think that an Israeli club should have been prevented from playing this match on moral grounds?
Personally, the match was scheduled, the match was supposed to have happened. I would have done it behind closed doors without fans from either side, and I'm a Villa fan.
Okay, it's interesting that you would have done it. So for you would have let it go ahead. You see, for a lot of other people out there, the fans thing was a bit of a red herring. Not complete red herring, but a bit of a red herring, because they just don't want Israel to be playing, an Israeli team to be playing in this thing at all. John, before I let you go, let me just say this. This has just come out this evening, right? The police have revealed that they banned Maccabi Tel Aviv fans from Aston Villa due to significant levels of hooliganism in the fan base, jeopardising safety around the match, rather than threats to visiting Israelis. Now, that is the first time that a West Midlands police chief has publicly explained the intelligence behind the decision that was angrily opposed by the Prime Minister. So, have the police got this right, or the Prime Minister got it right?
You've got a police service there that has done European football. They've done some, local derbies. I heard your reporter mentioning about the Birmingham City Villa derbies. I remember when they used to get spicy back in the day. Now, these are the guys that are doing matches with 20, 30, 40, 50,000 people week in, week out. Only a few months ago, we had the best part of 80,000 Ozzy Osbourne fans in there. Now, those guys, they've got a previous track record of keeping people safe, keeping people right. And if they've come out and said initially that there's going to be a problem, then let's have the faith and the energy in our police services for them to make their decisions. They're the experts, not Keir Starmer sat with his feet up.
Yeah, but then you can't have it both ways, John. You started by saying that the government needs to step up, and then you're saying the police should be the ones making the decision. Which is it, John?
No, that's exactly what I'm saying. The government needs to step up.
Okay.
And you know what? It wasn't the police. The police were lambasted when this whole first decisions of what needed to happen. The chief constable was getting it in the neck. But actually, who's right to make a decision? Should it be Keir or should it be?
Well, what do you think? Because what do you think the answer to the question is? Because I'll tell you what my answer is in a minute.
Who would you put faith in? An experienced police leader that's got counter-terrorism and all those other kind of aspects for a game like this? Or Keir Starmer with his current track record? I know Lee's grading gets a bit higher with me at the moment.
Yeah, but John, that's why I'm confused. Because I agree with you that it should be the police making the decision. However, given the political nature of this surrounding this match, right, the position I've come to a couple of weeks ago, that yes, the police have decided this, and it was not as clear-cut as what they've said now, because there was some ambiguity about whether it was all fans or some fans or whatever the decision was. Now they've come out and said it was actually hooliganism within the fan body, if you like, and it wasn't threats to visiting Israelis, right? So draw your own conclusions from that. My argument would have been flood the whole place with police, because it's so politically fraught that that's what needs to happen. Just my view, and I do think in this particular case, this team should be allowed to play, despite what people think, because I don't think individual sports people should be held accountable for the actions of their government. John, thank you, and good to talk to you. Imran in Chadwell Heath. Imran, good evening.
Good evening, Ali. I do agree with the large gentleman with regards to how the government has behaved. They've not made the right decisions, and they should have backed the police from the beginning, because the police are in the best position to make these kinds of decisions. That's just on that. The Maccabi, Tel Aviv Maccabi team should not be allowed to play. I have a very big reason for that.
Go on, tell us.
Now, as far as the fans are concerned, they definitely should have been banned, because they were just basically going around looking for it.
Okay, well, they're not coming anyway, so that's done.
So they're not coming, so that's fine.
Yeah.
As for the football team, I think many of the players in their official team are either serving or have served in the IDF. They may have committed war crimes. They may go back to committing war crimes, and if they step onto British territory, that should warrant an investigation, and that actually brings the game into disrepute. And that brings me on to my second point. If that is the case, then UEFA and FIFA should have stepped up and banned this team from actually playing at all. They banned Russia 4 days into the occupation of Ukraine. They banned Russia. It's now been, 2 years since October 7th? And UEFA and FIFA seem to be very fearful of making any kind of decision at all. So it seems to me that Western governments, particularly the European and the American governments, are using UEFA and FIFA as a political tool to basically, go against their enemies, their perceived enemies. And unfortunately, that brings the sport into disrepute. When we say, let's not mix politics with sports, well then why do you mix politics with sports? Allow UEFA and FIFA to be independent bodies, to be independent organizations, allow them to make decisions. Yes, they're going to make decisions against your allies, but, your allies are committing genocide.
Yeah, okay.
It's as simple as that.
Okay, 2 points, Imran. Firstly, why do you think they should be banned specifically? Is it because of the IDF point that you